Hello, everybody, and welcome to another film review. So, not really a film review. Obviously, if you clicked on the video, you know that it is a review of the first three episodes of the TV series The Last of Us. The reason why I'm doing review of the first three episodes and not individually is because I just kind of decided to do this now because I just got it up and running for doing the film reviews. So if you're into horror movie reviews, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We also do a lot of other things like actual haunted places. We do haunted house reviews in like the fall time. So if you're into that kind of stuff, make sure you're subscribing. But this will be a thing now where after each episode, I'm going to try and get a review up of each episode individually as quickly as possible after that episode airs. At least by the next day, and they're going to all be spoiler reviews. So now I am a big video gamer. I've played The Last of Us multiple times, and I've played Part 2 and all of that. I will not be spoiling um, things besides what's in that episode. So you don't have to worry about me spoiling the whole story if you haven't played like the game or anything. But I will compare like episodes to the games and stuff like that. So I will be comparing like the differences for that particular part of the story, if that makes sense. So I just want to get into it because I don't want this video to be real long, but I didn't want to just start on episode 4, which will be the newest episode, without talking about at least the first 3 episodes. So that's what this video is going to be. So I will say as well, like this is one of my favorite video game series, and that's the reason I decided to make these videos. I don't know if I'll do other series. If you'd like to see that, let me know. Again, it would be like thriller/horror series. There are some things that I would maybe like to review that I don't see people giving enough attention to. So maybe I'll go back and review some older ones that I really liked, some like horror series that's been on like television or streaming services and stuff like that. But when they announced The Last of Us being a TV series, I was kind of curious. I'm like, what in my mind, I'm like, I think it'll be okay, but I don't think it needs to exist because The Last of Us did it so well. But then when you think about it, it's kind of the same as a book. A lot of people haven't played the video games. Not everyone's a gamer. So it's cool that people get to experience what, in my opinion, is a world class story. It's better than almost any other zombie type story that's out there. So we'll go ahead and we'll kind of talk briefly about the first episode. So the first episode did a great job of the beginning of the apocalypse. So in the game, like it's similar, but it's a lot more narrowed. Like you just kind of like you play as the daughter to begin with. You don't actually play through. I don't think you play through as Joel until like the very end of like the little prologue part. But it's kind of cool because she just kind of wakes up in the middle of the night and then things kind of go crazy. Or in this, you get to see a little bit before that. There's a great horror moment where she takes care of like this elderly neighbor, and you get to like it's like out of focus background. You see like the old lady that's kind of like decrepit, like in the wheelchair, kind of start to do this like creepy thing like the cordyceps do, which is the virus in the show. Because basically, if you haven't watched it, which I assume you have because you're watching this, it's just like it's not a true zombie virus, right? They're right. It's cordyceps, which is an actual thing. It's in nature, which I think always makes The Last of Us creepier because it feels more real because of the fact that this is something that actually exists in nature. And that was something going into the show. I was really curious how they were going to do that, like how they were actually going to portray these creatures, and I think they did that really well, which we get to see in the second episode, which we get to in a minute. But something else I really liked about the first episode is this opening scene where it's like a 50s like I don't know, talk show talking to these scientists, and like their whole monologue is really cool, and like the close zooms and just the way it's filmed, like there's really no like music. It just really kind of led to this dreadful ambiance, and I just really like the way they set it up, and it also kind of instantly sets things up without too much exposition for the viewers that have no idea what The Last of Us is based off of. It kind of sets up what this virus is and what's kind of going to happen. It kind of gives you a clue on that. But the first episode did follow the game pretty close, besides adding some extra stuff to kind of a little more cinematic. Because again, in the game, you know, there's so much gameplay, and there's not going to be gameplay in a show/movie that you're watching. But yeah, Pedro Pascal's performance, the girl that plays his daughter, she was amazing. I don't know the name off the top of her head. And then you get to meet Ellie, which is played by Bella Ramsey, who is also phenomenal. You don't get to see her too much in this episode. The second episode is really where she gets to shine. But the first episode just did a really good job world building. I don't think it could have done much of a better job and I will be rating the episodes when I talk about them in full. And again, I'm just going to kind of cliff note the first 3 here, so that way when the fourth one comes out, I'll talk more in detail about that. But yeah, absolutely phenomenal episode. Kind of left on a cliffhanger after they get Ellie. They kind of get her, out of the thing. But I would give this episode a 10 out of 10. I think that it sets up the series in such a great way. You get a ton of information, and it just really has just such a great sense of dread. Like that opening sequence when the apocalypse is beginning, it really did. Like it just made you feel creeped out the way it's because a lot of it's filmed handheld, like the majority of it is, and it really gives you this like real sense like you're in the moment, and I really liked it. But the whole thing was just really done well. So that I think this would be a 10 out of 10 episode. So episode 2. Now this one, this is really them. They just learned that Ellie, that the person that they're transporting, because they don't know that she is infected, and that's like kind of the whole thing is that she is immune to the infection. The first person that they know of, at least, that's found that's immune. She got bit by one of these things, and she's not infected. It's just the wound just healed, and so Joel and Tess aren't just that convinced. So they're kind of like, well, look, we need our battery for our car, so we're just going to do like whatever we need to do, and we'll pawn her off on the Fireflies, and they can deal with it from there. But we want basically our payment. But this is the episode that I think out of the first 3 has been the most true to the game, because it's so amazing if you've played the games, because the set pieces look like you see them and you're like, I remember that. Like I remember walking through that, 10 years ago now, I think, almost, that the game came out. I remember going through like these places and all of that, and it's crazy how good the set design is. Like the whole thing is impressive, but the set design and how close it is to the game is good. The only complaint that I might have is there are a couple scenes where you kind of be like, yeah, that's CG. Like mainly background stuff. But the cool thing is when you get to actually see the clickers, which are the infected that have like fully turned into basically plant monsters. They did such a good job, and I guess it was pretty much all practical effects. Like they're people like in these costumes, and the intensity of the way that's shot, and it's just reminded me a little bit of the Jurassic Park scene from the first Jurassic Park when they're trying to hide from the velociraptors. It reminded me a lot of that, and it was done very similar. I imagine that scene, there's kind of inspiration there, but just the way they're hiding, the way they're like trying, because these things they can't see, but they can hear very, very well, and they'll come and they'll just get you. And like besides Ellie, if you're bit, you're just done. Like it doesn't matter if they kill you or not. If you're bit, you're just done. Well, of course, later in the episode, we find out that Tess did get bit, and well, she kind of reveals it, and she's like, look, I got bit. This was like hours ago, and I'm already like this infected. Look, and Ellie got a fresh bite too, I think, earlier in the episode. And she's like, look, hers is basically already healed. Like this is special, Joel. Like, I don't care what you need to do. You need to get her somewhere where they can see if they can make a cure for this. She could change the entire world. And like through a whole thing, Joel eventually basically kind of agrees, goes. And then there's a scene that I liked for the most part. They did changes from the game because it was soldiers that were coming in. Where in the show, there's like a horde of clickers because he has to shoot one. Because when they get there, all the Fireflies are dead. And like one is a clicker and they got into battle. He has to shoot one. There's all these clickers on the street where they go into this building where they're supposed to meet the Fireflies. And they start bum rushing them. But in the game, that's not how it is. They're soldiers. And all the soldiers come in, and then Tess basically has to like fend them off like guns a-blazing. But in this one, all of the cordyceps, the clickers, come in, and she basically blows them up. But there's this kind of strange scene where she's backed up against a wall, and the one like kisses her. Like it's really cool and creepy how they do that in this episode. It's like little plant things come out of their mouth, and like they go into her mouth to kind of like turn her to infect her, even though she's already infected. But it's weird because she backs up and she just stands completely still trying to light this lighter because she poured all this gasoline and grenades over the floor to blow the place up. But it's like a lot of people are like, well, why did she just like stand there and like let this thing kiss her? My guess is that you're supposed to kind of understand that like she was scared if she made noise, they would all bum rush her and she wouldn't be able to light the lighter on time. But it is just this kind of like awkward scene where she's just kind of like standing there like being like, it's all like at her, and I'm just like, that was weird and it was kind of creepy, but I guess it was effective. I forgot to mention the very beginning of this episode was another extra scene, which was cool because there's basically this lady in a diner and some people come and get her, and you think she's in trouble, but you end up realizing that she's actually like an expert in this virus, and they show her one of the very first people that's infected. And there's the whole cool, creepy scene that goes on there. And the guy, and at the end, she goes in the office, and the guy's basically like, hey, we need to figure out a cure for this. And she's like, I've studied this for almost my whole life. There is no cure. And he's like, well, what do we do? And she's just like, bomb. and I want to go home with my family now. Like basically saying you have to kill everybody in this town, including us, because it's the only way we can hope to stop this. Spoiler alert: they don't stop it. So then we get to the third episode, and this one is definitely the one that's been the most polarizing, and this is the newest one until I'm filming this on a Saturday, so tomorrow night will be the fourth episode. But this is the most polarizing because it deviates from the game very heavily. Some people, for whatever reason, partly because there's a lot of assholes out there, are very upset about this episode. I'll backpedal. I'd give episode 2 a 9. But this episode, so in the game, Bill and Ellie need to basically get a truck, and so they meet up with this guy Bill, and they actually do meet up with him, and they do talk about somebody named Frank. And it is hinted at that Frank and Bill have a relationship, but I think there's things through notes that kind of talk about it, but there's nothing that's ever like explicitly said, like exactly, how close together they were, what they did together, anything like that. So the beginning of the episode is Joel and Ellie, and there's some like cool like world building stuff there. The main thing that there is Joel says he doesn't care about Ellie, but as they are walking down this road, he's like, I want to go the long way because that way there's things I don't want you to see. And she's like, well, now I have to see it. And he's like, no, I really don't want you to see it. And this is already kind of showing that shell's breaking without him admitting it, because if he didn't care at all about her, he wouldn't care if she saw something that fucked her up, basically. But of course, Ellie being Ellie, she's like, no, I want to see this. And then it's like, there's a bunch of like corpses in basically a pit. And she's like, basically like, what is this? And he's like, well, they would tell people, oh yeah, we're going to take you to this like refugee camp. But if the refugee camp was full, they would just kill them all. And it does this cool, well, I say cool, but it's really kind of messed up thing where you see like this like cloth, and you realize it was the cloth of a child. Not that kid has anything to do, but then they take them off in the trucks from this town. But you know what happens to them because you just saw the cloth from the clothes in the pit of bodies. But anyways, then you get to meet Bill, who is played by Ron Swanson, also known as Nick Offerman. And I've seen Nick Offerman in quite a few things. I love his stand-up. I just love him in general. I love him. And I knew it would be in this episode, but I thought it would be, him interacting with Joel and Ellie. And it starts off as a flashback where the show is done, but then you get into this thing where it's like this whole montage of him realizing, oh, they took everyone, but he was hiding in his little like crazy man bunker, which in this instance, it's a good thing that he had it, I guess. Like, good job. Like, something like this happens. Every Dooms prepper out there is going to they're going to revel in it, right? But this character is so complex and so well done because there's nothing really stereotypical about this character at all. So you flash forward a little bit, he's made himself a whole little town because everyone else is gone. He's barricaded it up. He has all the weapons in the world. And one day he's having himself a nice little, that night he has steak dinner. But anyways, someone intrudes on his property and they fall into a hole, and he goes out and sees they're not infected in that. And the guy, he's basically like, because he's not a bad guy. He's like, okay, I'm going to let you go, but you can't stay or go. And the guy's like, I'm really hungry. And he's like, I don't care. Go away. The guy's like, no, I'm really hungry. You should probably feed me. And Bill's kind of like, oh, all right, sure. And you find out that this guy is Frank, and he does make him dinner and stuff. And then he's like, oh, you have a piano in here. And Bill's like, I don't know. Maybe you should leave, though. Like, it's very, standoffish for good reason, because most people in this world at this point just want to kill you and take your things. And they have this thing where he plays the piano, and then Bill's like, no, not that song. And he's like, well, why don't you play it? And they play it. And I think this is surprised a lot of people. I kind of knew where it was going to go, though, just because I knew that they probably had a relationship in the game, is where Frank is like, he asks him, who's the lady, or who was the lady, and before the world basically ended, and he's like, there wasn't one. And he just says, I know. And then instead of them being enemies, they make out. And then you kind of get this amazing, really realistic feeling love story between the two that they managed to blossom. I mean, they fixed the town. They had arguments. Probably one of my favorite lines of dialogue in the whole thing is they're having this argument, and Frank turns around and basically says, you and your crazy end-of-the-world bunker thinking that the government are a bunch of Nazis. And Bill's response is, the government is Nazis. And Frank says, well, yeah, now. And that was pretty funny. But yeah, you kind of get to see through, I'd say it's probably like a 45-minute flashback, you really get to see this relationship blossom and turn into something special from beginning to end. I mean, they managed to make it almost, I think it's like 16 years, almost 2 decades worth of time being together and making it work and having a semi-normal life in the middle of the apocalypse. And you just don't really ever see that. Like, these two made it work. And, and then you get to see Frank, and I don't know exactly what's wrong with him, but he has some very bad ailment, and he asks Bill, he's like, look, we've had a good life. I want this to be my last day. I want you to give me these pills, and then I want to be done. And Bill reluctantly eventually agrees, and they have the dinner, and he puts in the wine. He shows him, he crushes up, puts in his wine glass, and then, of course, Frank asks, he's like, well, was there actually pills already in the bottle, which they both drank from? And Bill says, enough to kill a horse. So then, Frank is kind of upset. He's like, I didn't really want you to die, but look, I get it. We managed to live a happy life. Like, you want to end it being happy, to go out by your own terms, not by a group of bandits or, the clickers, the monsters, whatever. And so they lay down in bed, and I was like, is it going to be like, some kind of like botched suicide? Because in the games, he is alive. Joel and Ellie interact with him. But no, they just die. And then, it was, all people find this extremely sad. I mean, I do think it's sad, but I find it more hopeful than anything else because they got what they wanted. Yeah, it is sad that Frank got sick and had to die, but they managed to find more happiness in those years than I think anyone else in this world ever has. Like in this time that this has happened. And I think that's wonderful, and I think that's something that you never get to see in media like this, in like your apocalyptic zombie type media. So I think it was super refreshing take. The performances by Nick Offerman, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the guy who played Frank's name, but both of their performances are just, all the performances in the show. By Anna Torv as Tess, by, Pedro Pascal as Joel, and Bella Ramsey as Ellie. Just, oh my God. Like, I think this is some of the best television I've ever seen. I find it riveting. I haven't seen something that's a weekly show like this that I've liked this much in such a long time. And my hopes were very middling going into this. And so far they have been blown out of the water. But back to the end of the episode, it goes back to Joel and Ellie, and they get to the place, and of course they are like, where are they? And Ellie finds I guess it's the suicide note, and he basically says, which is probably going to be Joel that reads this, because there was a time when Joel and Tess went to see them and had dinner with them to kind of like make a deal, and Bill is very standoffish, and Bill even says, I don't really like you, but like, I almost like you. It's kind of funny, because that is to his character, to the show. And, it is kind of this touching moment where they kind of realize, like, look, yeah, it sucks they're gone, but like, at least they went out the way they wanted to go out, and they had a fulfilling life during that time. A lot of people, I think, just don't like this episode because, like, I don't know why people, especially people that play the game, that say, like, why'd they make him, like, gay and stuff like that, and it's like, well, he was in the games. They just changed it. People just get upset about the weirdest things, but I thought it was beautiful. I really liked the way it was done. The other thing that was, the only thing that I didn't like, and this isn't a complaint, but I would have liked to see, because Bill is a hilarious character, I would have liked to see him interact with Joel and Ellie. I think that would have been fun, particularly Ellie, because they have real fun interactions together in the game. We missed on that for a completely separate, different side story. And Bill never comes back in the games. It's not really a spoiler, so like people are thinking like, well, if he didn't die in the games, how is it going to make sense? Well, because like they use him and then they just throw him away and never mention him again, which kind of always made me upset in the games, because like he was a good character and they just do nothing with him. They leave him and that's it. Bye. So I feel like this is a more fitting end, because now it makes sense why he wouldn't come back later on, but without it feeling like completely empty. This episode is easily a 10 out of 10, one of the best episodes of any kind of media I've seen in a long time. And I mean, it's as long as a movie. It's like an hour and a half. So, yeah, I am very happy with the series so far. Like I said, I'm curious if you've watched it. What have you thought about it? I'm hoping you have watched it or not. I just spoiled it all. What's been your favorite episode so far? Are you excited for episode 4? Because I think episode 4 is going to get pretty dark, because that's when I know in the game there's kind of a turning point, and you really start to get to see Joel be a little more intense with things. We'll say that. So very excited for that episode. And hopefully everyone else is too. And hopefully everyone's enjoying the show as much. And again, if you like watching me talk about television, horror, thriller stuff as well, let me know. Like and subscribe. It's the only way that we really can know. We have a Patreon. You can join there to help support us monthly, and there's some perks and stuff like that, like different merchandise and stuff that you'll get sent. And you can also leave us super thanks if you want to help support us that way. But that being said, thank you very much for watching. We should have a review for, I don't know if it'll be before or after this, but look out for on the channel of Infinity Pool. That'll probably be the first movie review that's on the channel. And then, of course, also look forward for Episode 4's spoiler talk / review of The Last of Us. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.